This isn't a mixing or production tip, it's not a new piece of gear, but I honestly think it's going to have a much bigger impact to you than any of that stuff. It's a big mistake that I've made, I've learned from, and I want to share it with you. This video carries on my fixing bad advice and sharing unpopular opinions in pro audio, but really it applies to anyone who works indoors. So whether you're video editing, working from home, you're in an office, this should make a big difference to your happiness, your productivity, and most importantly, health when you're working, which is gonna have a huge impact on everything else you do. First, I'd just like you to picture the ideal audio engineer studio. So walls lined with acoustic panels and diffusers, loads of gear, maybe some nice lighting. Now, the one thing that's missing in almost all of these ideal studios is windows. And I don't mean the operating system, I mean physical windows that let in natural daylight. As sound engineers, we've been conditioned to believe that these windows are the enemy. They leak in unwanted sound from outside and they bounce our carefully crafted mixes all over the place. The usual trick with studio design is either to completely cover them up, block them out, or simply design rooms with no windows and no natural light. Now, the whole point of this video, and what I really wish I knew sooner and implemented in my life, is that natural daylight is a biological necessity for humans, and it's just something that you really shouldn't compromise. And I hope in this video that I make a really compelling case that no matter where you are on Earth, depriving yourself of this natural daylight while you're working is going to have negative impacts to your health, happiness, and productivity. Now, I don't just want to be negative, I've got a bunch of advice and tips and tools that you can implement if you're not getting natural light. You know, I live in Scotland, we've just come out of winter, so there's, not a whole lot of natural light here. So let's get into some of the short and long-term issues. Exposure to natural light helps regulate the body's internal clock or circadian rhythm, which plays a crucial role in sleep-wake cycles. Numerous studies have shown that individuals who work in windowless environments or without adequate exposure to natural light experience poorer sleep quality and duration, which is going to tie into our next point. And that is that natural light exposure during the day affects the production of melatonin. It's a hormone that regulates sleep. And I promise I'm not just going to spiel out different studies and facts at you. I'll show you where we're going with this in just a moment. But a study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine found that workers exposed to natural light experienced better sleep quality, more physical activity, and a better quality of life compared to those without exposure to the natural light. And you could also say, well, there's melatonin supplements, why not just take those? This really doesn't fix the core problem. The way melatonin and adenosine interact throughout your circadian rhythm, they sort of have a bit of an interplay there. And if you just try to supplement and spike your melatonin at the end of the day, it might help you fall asleep, but it doesn't mean your sleep quality is necessarily going to be very high. So where I was going with all of that is that poor sleep and a disrupted circadian rhythm impairs your cognitive function, your productivity, and your concentration. And this takes us on to the next point, which is honestly what I'm most interested in, which is your eyesight and eye strain during the day. Your eyes need a lot of variety to maintain a healthy shape, function, and innervation. If you work in a windowless environment, this is just really difficult to get this variety. You're often looking at things very close, and you have to physically leave your desk and go outside to look at things further away. And we all know how this is. You get into your work, mixing, mastering, whatever it is, video editing, and a few hours can pass, and you've been staring at something just a few feet in front of your face. It can be difficult to schedule those breaks and actually get time to go outside. Many of you will have heard of the 20-20-20 rule, which is that for every 20 minutes of work at a screen or close up, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds, and this just relaxes the eye muscle. It actually gives your eye that variety. If you have windows, this makes it very easy because you can just physically look outside. Now, you might be onto the next street or a house, or you might be able to see the distant horizon depending on the view you've got. I do have a few other tips and tools to share, but I'll do that later. The second part of this eye strain point that I want to make is that natural light, the color temperature sort of changes throughout the day. It gives you further variety, whereas indoor lighting, often it doesn't mimic the changing color temperature of daylight, of natural light. That again is going to be giving you that variety. I think this one's going to be really important to a lot of people. That is that a windowless environment can feel enclosed and claustrophobic, which can often lead to feelings of stress and anxiety, even at a subconscious level. A study published in the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine found that workers in offices with windows had significantly lower levels of stress and higher levels of physical activity when compared to those in windowless offices. And again, there's numerous studies that support this, but even just anecdotal evidence, when I'm working with daylight, it does make me want to get up and go. I sort of want to finish my work, get outside, be a bit more physically active. Whereas when I feel secluded in a room with no windows, sometimes I can start feeling a little bit lethargic. And there are so many studies and points that I could bring up, but I just want to pull up one more that I found really interesting. There's not so much science behind it, but I did find it very fascinating. So this was a study by 2 Taiwanese researchers who were investigating the link between natural daylight and ethical behavior. So writing in the Journal of Environmental Psychology, they found that brighter surroundings can induce people to act less selfishly and increase the likelihood of honesty. Now, I just found that one absolutely fascinating. It sort of makes sense the more I think about it. Now, it's not saying people that work in dark rooms are dishonest. It's just the same person put in those 2 different environments could act differently. And I wonder what effect that could have on your overall well-being, your productivity, and whatnots. So if you can't get much natural light into your room, to mitigate these effects, there's a few things you can of course do. You can incorporate regular breaks outside or in well-lit areas. In particular, if you can try to expose yourself to natural light early in the morning, it makes a huge impact on that circadian rhythm that we talked about earlier. It sort of sets the time that you're going to start feeling sleepy later in the day. This is like oversimplified, whether that's just going for a walk, walking your dog, getting out doing some exercise. Again, like I said, I'm in Scotland, we just came out of winter. Sometimes it's not even light here until 9, 10, 11 in the morning. So, you could also try using light therapy devices or indoor lights to try and get a little bit more exposure to that bright light early in the morning. Of course, you can try to do things like maintaining a regular sleep schedule and maintaining good sleep hygiene. I know this is really difficult for music producers, creatives, editors, because often, inspiration can strike really late at night, so I know that one can be a real challenge. I'm going to make a dedicated video about desk setup, but just make sure you're not straining to see your monitor, so it's not too far away or too close. If you have to, increase the text size on apps. I know this seems a bit embarrassing for most people, but you can just, turn that slider up, make things a little bit larger on the screen so you're not squinting. You can also make sure there's no glare off your screen. So if you have windows or lights on the side, it sort of looks like this, where it sort of glares off your screen and makes you squint. Often when this happens, you're not even aware that you're straining your eyes, because the body has such a capacity to make up for bad posture, bad visual setting, and you can really, really compromise without knowing it. So just try to make sure there's no glare on your screen. I briefly mentioned earlier that 20-20-20 rule, and this really should be a minimum. Every 20 minutes of screen time, look at something at least 20 feet away for 20 seconds. This just relaxes the muscles of the eye and further gives them variety, which helps them maintain a healthy function. If you can, I would suggest looking at things even further away and for longer. This will both relax but also strengthen your eye, so you can almost view it as a workout for your eye. You're doing too much close work, you need to do a little bit of distant work as well. The next thing you can do is make sure that you have adequate diffused lighting in your studio. So you don't really want lights that are glaring and shining off, things like that, but you want to have appropriate lighting for the different time of day. Maybe in the morning you want to have a bit of light, and then in the afternoon you want to have quite a lot of light mimicking that natural daylight, and then maybe towards the evening you turn things down, turn the color temperature up so things become a little bit warmer and softer like this. And this is something I got completely wrong in my old studio. There were no windows and there was no lighting like this. It worked for a short period of time, but really it was incredibly unhealthy, which is why I removed that old studio build video. But I talk more about that at the very end of the video. I've got a bunch of sort of FAQs there. And finally, to round out this tools section in the video, I would recommend a couple of podcasts by Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a professor of neuroscience and ophthalmology. He has a wonderful podcast, and he shares a bunch of tools and techniques for optimizing all different parts of your health and well-being, but he's got a couple that I think are particularly useful for audio engineers working inside. I've linked a few of those into the description. I've applied a few of the principles in some of those episodes, and I found it genuinely has improved my happiness and my productivity when working in the studio. So if you do have windows in your studio and you're not happy with how they sound, either sound coming in or sound reflecting, there's of course a few things you can do. Double and triple glazing and proper seals, that's going to help almost all the sound from getting in, unless you're beside a very noisy street. Something else you can consider is just using some of the fantastic noise reduction tools that exist now. Even if you've got some traffic noise, AC noise or whatever leaking into your audio, you can remove and eliminate almost all of it using these tools. I've got some other videos that detail that. But then I'd also just recommend getting really heavy curtains or blinds so you can draw these down when you really need to minimize those reflections, say for when you're recording vocals, or if you're mixing or mastering with loudspeakers, you can pull those blinds down. You can just raise them back up and allow that natural light in when you're done. I recently put a poll on my community tab. It seems that about 3/4 of you are using headphones or IEMs, where your acoustic treatment doesn't even matter whatsoever, even in open-backed headphones. But again, that's a myth for another video. So just as that final point is that right now, I'm at a point where I believe unless you're building an entire room from scratch, designed with acoustics in mind, with several feet or meters of acoustic absorption and diffusion on all of the walls, ceiling, floor, everything, unless you're going down that route, which is an enormous expense, I think the benefit of windows in the room significantly outweighs any negative to the sound quality, especially if you can employ blinds, curtains, and some room corrective software. As with any video like this, I've got a bunch of disclaimers and FAQ, so I hope before anyone wants to argue with me or leave a detailed comment explaining how wrong I am, if you just listen to these first or read them, I'd really appreciate that. So the first one is that it's really not going to be a problem if you're, say, an artist, if you're recording an album and you go to one of these windowless studios with phenomenal acoustics. If you're just in there for a couple of days, maybe a week, recording your song, there's not going to be any negative impact to your health, especially in the long term. So I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about the engineers that have to live and work in those environments on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's absolutely worth sacrificing the natural light for an experience. It's like going to the cinema. There's no windows, you're just in there for a few hours. It's not going to impact your long-term health, and it's exactly the way it's meant to be. I'm not arguing against that. Secondly, of course, there are times when you need highly controlled lighting. If you're a video editor and you're in an editing bay, everything needs to be incredibly color accurate. Of course, there's almost no space for natural light in those situations that can change and affect how you perceive the screen. The third thing I'd like to mention is that yes, I previously built a studio with no windows, with no natural light. This was on the recommendation of dozens and dozens of professionals in the field who told me and suggested that you should not build a studio with windows because they'll just wreak havoc on the sound. I removed that video specifically because I didn't want to recommend to people that they should build a space without windows. It felt good for a while, but I noticed working in there that I started feeling worse and worse. You can even see in my old videos, like nothing could really survive in that room. I had plants that were just dying, and really they're like the canary in the coal mine. In fact, no, I was the canary in the coal mine. I just wasn't as healthy and happy in that space as I could. And it's not all natural light that's to blame. It's not like any one thing is the biggest problem. Health is multifactorial, so I know there's more to it. But that is why, yes, I previously built a studio with no windows. I don't recommend it. People are allowed to learn and grow. This is what I'm recommending now. I think natural light is awesome. And then fourth and finally, I know there will always be those comments of people saying, but you're not a doctor. How dare you give anybody advice on how to feel better? Now, the truth is, yes, I'm not a doctor, not an ophthalmologist, I'm not a sleep scientist or anything like that. The reality is anyone can share information and advice that they think is going to help other people. And that's all I'm really ever trying to do with this channel. If you've learned something, please share it with me. I've tried to learn something, I'm going to share it with you. And the truth is as well, there are many doctors that share fantastic advice online, but most doctors are busy doing their job. And even if they do know an awful lot about how to optimize your health, well-being, happiness, productivity, most of them are not publicly sharing that information because they're really busy doing their job. Life-saving interventions, surgeries, research, they're not online, they're not sharing all this stuff. Although there are people that do a fantastic job of sharing and educating. I also have a bunch of personal experience to draw on, and I hope that if you have any personal knowledge and experience, that some of you will share it with me so that I can learn as well. I just don't believe that you have to be an absolute qualified expert in something to even be able to talk and try to help people. Okay, so that's all for today, and I really do hope that's helpful, especially if you're suffering with any kind of ill health or looking to improve your health span. And I know many of you watching are very young, so you might think this stuff won't affect you for ages. I'm also very young. The earlier we start incorporating healthy practices into our life, the better the impact across our life is going to be. But anyway, that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.